my name is Cataline Parrott, and this is my third project for Intro into Pop Culture. For this project, I had to choose two shows and compare and contrast them. So, of course, I had to choose one of my favorite shows of all time, Malcolm in the Middle. And The Middle. Malcolm in the Middle was first aired on January 9th, 2000. It ran from May 14th, 2016, and is critically acclaimed. The whole series follows Malcolm, who is found out to be a genius. He's the third oldest of four boys, later to be five. It is a show from the early 2000s, but is not an unfamiliar sight today. It follows a dysfunctional middle-class family. Later in the 2000s came a show called The Middle. It first aired on September 30th, 2009, and concluded on May 22nd, 2018. Ignoring the obvious coincidence in the name, the show also follows a middle-class family in Middle America. It is another show about a family that isn't well off, but is just trying to get by. Despite the differences these shows have, they both present the same moral at the end of the pilot. By focusing mainly on narrative analysis, with a sprinkle of Marxist analysis, it can be concluded that American culture in the from 2000 to 2018 was concerned with families, not rich ones, but the ones that represented the everyday Joe. They show the struggles they go through, but in the end, they both conclude with the same moral. Their family's not great, but they do the best they can. This suggests a realization that America as a whole is middle class. They struggle, but they still strive for a better life. And it gives people a show that they can relate to, or even just look at and say, well, at least my family's not that one. So the pilot episode of Malcolm in the Middle is called The Pilot. Very creative. It starts off with Malcolm narrating what is happening, explaining that what his family is. This is the first major difference between the two shows. The Middle is narrated by Frankie, who is the mother of the family. Throughout the episode, Lois, who is the mother in Malcolm in the Middle, uses the same line over and over again, with different blinks. She says, we only have 2 waffles, so one of you is going to have cereal. In the morning, she says, well, we ran out of ham, one of you is going to have an egg salad. And then she also says, 2 of you can have pizza for lunch, well, the other one can have one that looks like peas. By then, we kind of realize that food in this house is scarce, or good food, to be particularly scarce. Even when they sit down to have dinner, they scarf it down like they haven't eaten all day. In the Middle as well, the food shortage is also prevalent, with Axel, the eldest son, complaining that there's no chips in the house. Frankie bringing home fast food all the time, and then Brick getting his waffle and it's frozen. And Frankie says, well, at least it'll last longer. Both of these shows show that people in middle class struggle with the need for food, or at least healthy food, good food. They don't have enough money for good food, or just get enough for these growing children. There is then the presence of a broken dryer in both shows. So Lois takes out her bra from the dryer and texts on her cheek and sees that it's still wet, so she puts it back in. Sue, on the other hand, in the Middle, gets her leg warmers shredded to pieces. And all Frankie could say to her is, you can't put wet things in the dryer anymore. It's almost suggesting that nothing in middle-class families' homes work right, especially the dryer. It's like they ought to have appliances malfunction for them to even be considered middle class. How dare that middle-class family have a working dryer? They're not middle class. Oh, they must be rich. Or we then get the presence of the mothers. They're both stressed out and doing things for their family. Lois, although seen in other episodes having a job, seems to be the homemaker, taking time to cook and clean everything. Frankie, on the other hand, has a job and is not on top of her kids as much. She doesn't say what she is thinking as much as Lois does either. Frankie and Lois can both be seen as bad mothers, but for different reasons. One is a control freak and the other has little faith in her kids. But they are also seen as the ones their family relies on the most. It is evident in Lois constantly taking charge and controlling the boys, while it's shown in Frankie when she says, we did teach them the word dad, didn't we? Because she's constantly hearing her name. They're constantly relying on her. But they are trying their best. They both take care of their kids. People of the middle class ought to love their kids. They ought to have these mothers that are underappreciated, but yet still try their hardest. The mothers ought to be relied on for help, and their family has to take them for granted. They both also show the families fitting into certain standards. We have the eldest troubled child evident in Axel in the Middle and Francis and Reese in Malcolm in the Middle. Then the children who are awkward and kind of useless, Sue and Dewey. Then there's the weird one that doesn't fit into the scheme of the family. In Malcolm in the Middle, it's Middle. When Lois finds out he's smart, she thinks they're going to say he's special. Why do you feel like you always need to label everyone? She says. But she soon changes her mind when she finds out it's positive. When explaining to Hal, Malcolm's father, that he's a genius, Hal says, "Where do you think he got that from?" Surprised that he's different from the rest of the family. Brick, on the other hand, in the middle, is not a genius, but is seen as weird. He whispers to himself, and when the school notices, Frankie says, "I know he's not a cookie cutter kid," pretty much saying the same thing Lois is saying, that yes, he doesn't fit into things, but why do you have to label him? Brick is not a genius, but is special. He does not fit into the daily life of his family. These middle-class families are pretty much cookie cutter. A husband, a wife, 3 kids of various genders. Yes, of course, Malcolm in the Middle has more than 3, but since Francis is away and in later episodes they of course have another kid, I think we can get by on it still being cookie cutter. Families like this ought to have 5 people in it, the mother, the kids. It's an archetype, and it's almost like saying in American culture, this is how your family should be. A husband, a wife, and these kids. The last difference is the narration, the point of view. Who is giving the narration? In Malcolm in the Middle, it focuses on none other than Malcolm, the middle child. Things are seen through a child's eye, so obviously it's going to seem a lot worse. He fights with his brothers, he's smart and intelligent, but doesn't want to be seen as weird. Then there's Frankie Heck, the mother of the Heck family in the middle. She's the mother, so the narration is through her eyes. She criticizes her children more in her head. She has it rough, and her family's tough, but she seems almost bitter about everything. Having the narration through the eyes of a child is so much more effective when the moral of the episode, pretty much the whole show, is said. In Malcolm in the Middle, it's, if a bunch of birds can make the best of what they have, so can I. Not the greatest family, but we can still get better. When a child says something like this, he is a child, so for him it's going to seem a lot more daunting. This situation is a lot more terrifying for him. He has no control, yet he knows that things will get better. Frankie, on the other hand, says families are hard, but she loves them. Having the mother say this is less powerful. The audience already knows that the mother loves the family, and putting her through tough times is not going to make the moral sound even stronger. Malcolm, a kid who thinks everything is unfair, is more likely to say that he hates his family, yet he doesn't. So the moral is so much more powerful. Yet, since the morals are the same, it is saying that, yes, times are tough, but they're not that terrible. Like, at least we still have our family. In conclusion, the show focuses on the class, showing what ought to be expected of this middle class. Yet, they have broken appliances, tough kids, shortages in food. Yet, it shows that even though they struggle, their families are still strong and still love each other even if it is rough. And it shows an audience that when they watch this show, they can see and say, well, at least my family's not like that. And at least I do have a family. I can laugh about having broken things, but in the end, again, what is most important is that I do have that family. Anyways, thank you for listening. That's all.